Welcome to Candidates Night, sponsored by the Dover Democratic Town Committee, chaired by Elaine Rosenberg and Carol Lisbon. I want to acknowledge Jen Luthi, who's done the registration, and Mike Klein, who's managing the Dover-Sherburne cable TV feed. I'm Woody Weiss.
I'm Kay Peterson.
And we're moderating this because we weren't paying attention when Carol and Elaine asked for volunteers. Just a reminder, it's not too late to request a mail-in ballot, but you should request it as soon as possible. And a few ground rules for tonight. The session tonight and the session Thursday night are both being recorded and will be replayed on the Dover-Sherburne cable TV channel. Chat is enabled for those people who are attending. We received more than our ability to absorb in the way of questions from the registrants. So if you want to submit a question, we're happy to forward them to the campaigns after the meeting tonight. We're going to start this evening with introductory statements from each of the candidates for 6 minutes each. And then after the candidates have had a chance to introduce themselves and talk about their candidacy, there are a series of questions that we've extracted from those that have been submitted and will give each of the panelists a chance to answer each question in 2.5 minutes. I'll give you a warning with 15 seconds to go in the answer. I should just let people know in advance that Mr. Zannetos has to leave at 8, so he's going to be dropping off in the middle. I did want to say about the questions that we've tried to take questions that don't ask the candidates to reiterate what's on their websites. We figure that anybody who's capable of attending a Zoom meeting is capable of navigating their way to the candidates' websites and can read their policy positions, so that the questions will hopefully spark some more interesting discussion about the way the candidates think about the role of being a representative. So we'll start with the statements. We're going to go alphabetically in order, and then I'll rotate around for each of the questions. So starting with Mr. Cavell.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Woody and Kay and Carol and Jen and Mike and everyone in Dover. It's great to be with you. It's great to be with you, Jesse and Ihssane and Chris. Thanks for having us tonight. I'm Dave Cavell, born and raised in Brookline. That's going to start to sound familiar. Let's start with some good news. I cannot wait to get to work with President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. I think we can all agree on that. And the question for folks tonight in Dover is, why vote for me instead of any of these other good people who are running in the Democratic primary on September 1st? You know, who will represent Dover and the entire district and get to work with the Biden-Harris administration, God willing, on day one, and doing the damage from these last 4 years and representing this district? Well, first, I think we need ranked choice voting. None of us should win this race with 20% of the vote. You know, I think with so many good people, you should be able to rank your preference of candidates. Second, I know that a lot of people do want to have this job, but I do know how to do it. We can talk about endorsements. Yeah, I've got a lot of endorsements as well. Last week, I published an op-ed with Charlie Merrow from Merrow Manufacturing in Fall River, largest employer down there. I've been endorsed just in the last week by local elected officials in Taunton and Dighton and Easton. I'm proud to be supported by John Favreau and Ben Rhodes, and the first person to drop out of this race, who dropped out to endorse me, Tom Schack, former comptroller. But I also get that this race is going to be decided by you, not by endorsements or consultants or anything else. And when it comes to doing this job, I think a big part of that right now is defending public education. Dover-Sherburne's one of the best school systems in the state, and I know how important that is. That's actually why I got into public service. I'm here because I started out as a fourth grade public school teacher in the South Bronx, one of the poorest school districts in America. I had a student who would come to class every morning, put his head down on his desk, and fall asleep. And finally, I figured out why. He let me walk him home, and it turned out he was homeless. He was sleeping under a bridge with his father. I had students who were hungry. I had students who outnumbered desks on my first day in the United States of America. I thought that was wrong. And then I saw this guy named Deval Patrick speak in a living room about how every student in America had limitless potential and just needed someone to believe in them. And I decided that, yeah, I wanted to help do that. So I went to work for him in public service, and I've been in public service ever since. I was on Deval Patrick's communications team. I went to law school. I ended up working for the Obamas as a presidential speechwriter in the White House. And then 2 weeks after I was working in the White House, I was helping to sue the White House because I was Maura Healey's assistant attorney general and senior advisor for 2.5 years after I left the White House. And that's the difference. You know, when I say I'm going to pass a Green New Deal, it's because I worked on the climate crisis. I helped investigate ExxonMobil. I helped sue the Trump EPA to protect the Endangered Species Act and stop offshore oil drilling, and was there when we passed the Paris Climate Accords in the White House. When I say I'm going to support Medicare for All, it's because I worked on the ACA in the Obama White House, and I defended the ACA in Maura Healey's office. And before this pandemic, I was the first candidate in the race to support a presidential candidate, and I supported Elizabeth Warren because I knew our healthcare system was not giving enough people health insurance that they could afford that was quality even then. And look at where we are now. And I'll also say, I know that a lot of folks are skeptical when we show up for the first time because we're running for office. I'm not. You know, I was in the 4th District, in places like Dover-Sherburne, working with Maura Healey on the opioid crisis, helping get prevention education into school systems. And this is one of the first things I'm going to get to work on because I made a promise to families in the 4th District who had lost children, grandparents who were now raising grandchildren, who said, you know, we've been talked to about the opioid crisis for a long time, but folks haven't delivered. I'm going to when I'm in Congress. You know, I don't just not like Trump. I helped sue the guy 50 times and hold him and his administration accountable. I don't just miss Barack and Michelle Obama. I actually worked for them in the White House and saw how members of Congress can make real change. One of the reasons we weren't able to do even more in that administration was because we didn't have enough people in Congress. We didn't just sort of vote the right way, but could lead the right way. That's what I think we need. I'm not taking a dime of dark money. I have committed to not accepting a dime of fossil fuel money or police union money, corporate PAC money. I've disavowed any super PAC spending on my behalf. You know, I've also committed to traveling offices because I think that that's part of this work as well. You got to talk to everyone everywhere. It's why my websites in Say One has been not just in English, but in Spanish and Portuguese as well. And it's why I'm not just going to have the 2 offices, one in Attleboro and one in Newton. And I'm not just going to, you know, have a couple coffees in the district, but I'm actually going to take the show on the road reserve office space in Dover and in Milford and in Easton and in Taunton and in Fall River and come to you a couple times a month with the staff from the office and the services of the office. The job is called representative for a reason. Look, this is the 4th Congressional District. It's one of the leading Democratic seats in this country. And I just want to close by saying, you know, the day after the Trump election, President Obama brought us into the Oval Office. And he said, you know, I know that a lot of you are upset about this election, and I want to ask you a simple question. What are you going to do about it? Because, you know, as he said, he wasn't going to be president beyond January 2017, no matter what happened. And so this was up to us. And so here again in Dover tonight, I say to you all, what are we going to do about this? Are we going to actually pass a Green New Deal? Are we actually going to fix our healthcare system? Are we actually going to end gun violence? Are we actually going to protect reproductive rights or not? And the answer has to be yes. That's why I'm running, and I'd be honored to earn your support tonight.
Great. Thank you very much. Ms. Leckey?
Hey, thank you so much. And thanks, Dave, for that introduction. My name is Ihssane Leckey. I've been running in the race for about 15 months now. I'm originally from Morocco, North Africa. I was born to a public school teacher father and a farmer mother. And we didn't have much. We know what the pink slips meant. We lived paycheck to paycheck. But we were raised on the values that you give no matter how little you have, and the more you have, the more you give to those who have been denied opportunity, to those who have been sidelined by our unjust systems. And you always thrive to create a world that is built on justice. And so when I came to the US at age 20, I had already lost my father because we couldn't afford to pay for his health condition. And I also had survived an unsafe abortion that almost took my life because Morocco deemed abortion as a crime. And I was seeking a world that just provides everyone a life with dignity, that fights for our freedoms of identity, of religion, freedom of speech, and that gives people the basic necessities to live. Their right to housing, to healthcare, to great education, to protest, their right to reproductive justice, and more. And I thought America is going to be the place where all of that is available to all people. And I believe in that, I still do. But when I came here at age 20, I took jobs that paid me poverty wages, mopping the floors at the restaurants and pushing the strollers with the babies. And I realized that that American dream that I had was not afforded to just everyone in our country. And although we live in the richest, most powerful country in the world, we have millions of Americans who are facing sexual harassment and wage thefts on the job, who are being denied the opportunity to thrive and to create that America that we pride ourselves on. So I decided to do something about it. I vowed that I'm going to do everything in my power to dismantle any system in America that has created that unnecessary suffering, and that I'm going to be instrumental in building the America that we believe in. One that loves its people back, one that has a government that is representative of who we are and of the values we stand on as a democratic nation. So I put myself through community college and then went on with a Women in Math scholarship to go to Boston University and earned a degree in economics and math. And I graduated after the financial crisis of 2008. I was appalled, like many of us, to see our government deciding to side by the big corporations, handing them blank check for bailouts, and leaving our people homeless to foreclosures and jobless and without health insurance or health care. And again, it was more of a motive for me to step into the game. I became a Wall Street regulator. I joined the Federal Reserve and I became an examiner, and I was in the thick of the implementation of the Dodd-Frank, holding accountable the biggest banks in our system. That work was dismantled by Trump. That work was dismantled by the corporate government that takes money from the corporations. And now I'm fighting back even harder, not just because of the wreck of our economy, but also because I'm a Muslim, because I'm an immigrant, because I'm the only woman of color in this race, and because I'm a true believer in the American dream, and that no one should be the outlier. I shouldn't be the outlier to succeed. All of us, no matter our skin color and no matter our background, we should be able to be afforded the same opportunities to thrive in America and live that American dream. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Ms. Mermell?
Great. Thank you, Woody and Kay and the entire town committee for having us here this evening. I know no one needs another hour of Zoom in your life, so I appreciate everyone taking the time. My name's Jessie Mermell, and I'm running for Congress to take on Donald Trump and his minions, to fight for Medicare for all and a healthcare system that works for everyone, that everyone can afford and access, to fight for reproductive justice, and to lead an equitable recovery to COVID-19. This is a crowded field, but I believe that the people of the 4th Congressional District deserve a Congresswoman who can provide the bold progressive leadership that this district deserves, that's necessary to lift up working families, and that's necessary as we chart a fair, just, and equitable path forward from the multiple crises facing our country. And I've built a 20-year career here in Massachusetts doing just that. From my time heading up external affairs at Planned Parenthood, pounding the pavement in Congress to fight for reproductive health care to be included as preventive care in that landmark legislation, working side by side with Governor Patrick as a senior member of his team when he was governor, on the front lines of municipal government when I was on the select board in Brookline and had the chance to partner with some remarkable local activists to tackle climate change at the municipal level, to the work that I've been doing the past 5 years, running the Alliance for Business Leadership, the socially responsible business organization in Massachusetts, doing the work that we know is good for workers and for families and for equity and for the environment, but that's also good for business and good for the economy. Things like paid family and medical leave, earned sick time, raising the minimum wage, investing equitably in transportation, housing, and education. You know, there are real differences in this race. I'm one of few candidates in this field who have consistently supported the policies that I think are core to our values as Democrats and essential to create the future that we want for this district. Medicare for all, free 2- and 4-year public college tuition, including technical school and community college, student debt relief, and defunding the police. And I know that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I'm happy to take questions about it as we go through the evening. I'm so proud to be running a campaign where we're leading the field in transparency. About 6 weeks ago, I released 6 years of my tax returns, not something we're required to do as congressional candidates. Because at a time when Donald Trump is lying and cheating and stealing his way through what I all know we are working hard to make sure stays as just 4 years in office, I think we have a responsibility as Democrats to run the exact opposite type of campaign, run campaigns that are rooted in accountability and transparency. And I'm glad that some of my fellow candidates have joined me in doing that, at least to a certain extent. And I hope that those who haven't will either join me or explain to voters why they aren't providing that level of accountability and transparency so that voters can be assured that we're not beholden to anyone other than the people showing up at the ballot box and casting their vote. I'm also really proud to be the progressive in this race who has built a broad, strong, diverse grassroots coalition to have the support of people like Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, Suzanne Bump, our state auditor, former First Lady Diane Patrick, and a host of labor endorsements. Just last week, we announced our 21st labor endorsement with organizations like SEIU, the Mass Teachers Association, Mass Nurses Association, and so many more. And organizations like the Coalition for Social Justice that have been doing the work, particularly in the southern part of this district, around social justice and workers' rights for so many years. And in a race where, unfortunately, we aren't able to meet voters these past 5 or 6 months in person, we're doing it over Zoom. I think endorsements matter so much as these organizations that are expert in what matters to their members, what matters to the future of the 4th Congressional District, kick the tires on us as candidates. And I think the reason that you're seeing the progressive community, the social justice community rally around our campaign is because I've spent the past 20 plus years in community doing the work. And because our campaign is powered by people, not by corporate PAC money, not by money from the fossil fuel money industry, and not by personal wealth. We've raised everything we've raised through individual donations and from organizations that support social justice. And we've done it with an average donation of under $200 a pop, all during a global pandemic when the middle class is struggling. I'm very proud of the people-powered campaign that we've run and the diverse coalition that we've put together. You know, there are real choices in this race. And I'm proud to be someone in this race who has spent the past 20 years fighting for our shared values as Democrats, fighting for a just and equitable healthcare system, fighting for workers, fighting for the things that we know are going to be so essential as we move this country forward out of these challenging times. And there's a choice between that type of candidate and another type of candidate who will be on when you have your second round, who I think has a very, very different resume. You know, in these challenging times, I think the question all of us as voters need to be asking is who can translate a resume into action? Who can translate a resume into the change that we need to see for you, for your families and friends, for your communities, and for our entire district? And I hope that I demonstrate to you tonight that I'm the candidate with the experience, with the vision, with the relationships, and with the commitment to do that work for you and for everyone in the 4th Congressional District. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be with you tonight, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Great, thank you. Mr. Zannetos.
Thanks, Woody. Woody and Kay, thank you very much. It's great to be here with everyone. My apologies for having to leave at 8 o'clock. I had a commitment I made prior to this event being known, and I want to keep that commitment, so I do apologize. You may not know me, many of you. I entered this race a bit late, and I'd like to share a little bit about why I entered the race. First, a little bit about my background. I was born and raised in the Boston area. I went to school here at MIT. I raised my family here in this district, settling in Wellesley. I started my companies in my nonprofit here. I am a tech entrepreneur. I've started 3 companies here in Massachusetts, creating hundreds of jobs and $250 million of salary for people to pay their mortgages, to pay their rent, to pay for education and other services and necessities for their families. I've also started a nonprofit called STEM Match MA, which brings companies together with schools to make STEM-related opportunities more accessible and available to marginalized communities. When you look at this race, as Democrats, you have 9 very good candidates, and they're all good people. And when I entered the race, I didn't enter the race because they were bad people. They're all good. They've got strong democratic values, as I do. We'll all bring those down to Washington. What really differentiates us as candidates is the experience that we'll bring down to Washington to address the most important problems that we face. And that really is the challenge for voters, is to figure out what is the most important experience, what is the most important leadership capability that we need in Washington for the next 2 years. Not for a lifetime appointment, but for the next 2 years. We have to face it. We have challenges everywhere we look. You could say we have crises wherever we look, whether it's access to affordable health care, whether it's a climate that is getting worse every day and harder to fix every day, whether it's the fact that it has been here for centuries, but we have this awakening to perhaps finally address some areas of systemic racism that hold our people back and frankly endanger our people. Everywhere we look, we seem to have an issue. But as we deal with this pandemic and as we get closer to a vaccine, I believe the single most important issue that we have that affects every one of these issues, in fact, creates some of them and exacerbates them, is the fact that we've had an economy for too long that benefits those at the top and not everyone else. Everyone else works harder and they fall farther behind. Our economy and transformation from the industrial age has eliminated 20% of the middle class jobs and replaced them with low wage jobs. The only opportunity is at the high end if people can afford to pay for the lottery ticket of a $250,000 college education. We need to address this. This problem was with us before Donald Trump, and it was with us before the pandemic, and it's going to be with us after, and it will be worse. It's something that we must address for our people. We need people in Washington who understand the economic and technology drivers of inequality, who understand how to create jobs, who understand how to create new pathways for people to get good jobs without a 4-year college degree. This is what I've done in my career, including in my nonprofit where I brought together Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare, State Street Bank, and other great companies to invest $500,000 in a program at Mass Bay Community College to make cybersecurity jobs, 9,000 of which are chronically unfilled in Massachusetts, available to people with a 1-year cyber certificate education, along with experiential learning and a paid internship. Now, I've explained why I think my experience is needed down to Washington, but I didn't explain to you why I'm running. And again, there are many good candidates in this race. Emotionally and personally, the reason I'm running, the reason I stepped in February and March to run, is that I can't stand to leave this mess, a dysfunctional Congress and a divided country, to my kids and their generation. What a horrible legacy for our generation to leave this to the next generation. We have a lot of fighters in Washington, and you're going to hear a lot of people talk about fighting. We need people who build and bring people together to find creative solutions to the tough problems in a way that everyone wins. Not win-lose, win-win. I was an intern for the late Senator Kennedy, and I learned from him that you could fiercely advocate for your values and your policies, and at the same time, find a way to work with people who you disagree with to get things done. So why am I running? I'm running to get things done. I hope I can earn your vote, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Great, thanks to all of you. So we're now going to turn to questions. As I said, we're going to rotate the order. So we'll start with Ihssane, then Jesse, then Chris, then Dave on this. And each time we'd like you to keep your answers to 2.5 minutes or less. First question, the last 3.5 years have taught us that our government is a government of norms, not just laws, but Congress has been frighteningly impotent in enforcing these norms. Do you feel these norms, things such as transparency, cooperation with the investigative function of Congress, et cetera, can be reestablished without a bipartisan effort? And can we trust Republicans to constrain an executive from their own party in the future? Are there structural or other interventions that need to be implemented at the federal level to ensure that President Biden and future Republican presidents are more constrained than President Trump? Ihssane?
Thank you. That is a very important question. It really hits home for me, especially being a Wall Street regulator who comes from understanding information security, understanding integrity, and understanding transparency. And the importance of that in governance from within organizations, and also their responsibility towards the American people. One of the issues, and I understand you may be talking about Trump and how important it is that we have a president that we can hold accountable. We have a president that is impeachable. We have a president that they have violated human rights like Trump has done, that they should be removed immediately, and we should have the systems to do that. I believe that the lack of transparency is not only at the presidential level. It really goes into a lot of our institutions, and I've seen this as a Federal Reserve regulator, where the revolving door has crushed any protection we could actually make for the people. Those who were CEOs on Wall Street, who were in the C-suite of, for example, Goldman Sachs, walked right into the White House and became Trump's advisors, and then worked to dismantle the regulation and make it really difficult for us to hold large corporations accountable. And so there is lack of creating safety systems that are not breakable in the way our governance is and in the way our regulatory environment is. And that is a threat to our economy. The same thing in Congress. And I would say the first and foremost thing is the money in politics. The way that Congress people were able to benefit from this crisis to their personal wealth by selling stock and doing things that are, quite frankly, should be illegal. That's speculative, and that should be illegal. They should not be allowed to even hold stock in those corporations. As somebody who works at the Fed, I wasn't allowed to hold stock in the banks that I regulated. I wasn't allowed to even have a mortgage in one of the banks that I regulated. And these people who represent us should be held to the same standards.
Great, thank you. Jesse?
Let's be clear. The path to the reform and the bolstering of democracy runs through the November elections. I think we have all been horrified by what we have seen when it comes to both the laws and the norms being violated by this president and by his entire administration. And my job, as what I hope will be the next member of Congress from this district, won't start on January of next year. It starts right now, fighting to elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and making sure that Donald Trump and Republicans across the country aren't reelected. As much as I hope that there will be a path toward reform, a path toward solidifying those norms that you talked about in your question in a bipartisan way, I have very, very little faith that the current Republican Party will be a part of getting that done in this country. So step one is all of us pounding the pavement to make sure that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are in office. Then I think we need to focus aggressively on protecting the right to vote and making sure that we're protecting the integrity of our democracy. For me, that starts with HR 1, getting big money out of politics, ending corruption, and making sure that we have teeth back in the anti-corruption laws in our government. When it comes to voting, we need to make sure that we're restoring the Voting Rights Act. What we saw happen when the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act in 2013 is directly related to the type of corruption and withering of trust that we're seeing in our government as elections, quite frankly, are stolen or marred by voter suppression across the country. We need everybody to be able to vote by mail. That means, by the way, we need a postal service that works and that isn't being held hostage by this president. We need to remove witness requirements, remove voter ID requirements. We need to make sure that there's funding for voting so that town clerks and secretaries of state have the funding that they need to exercise what's necessary in conducting our democracy. And we need to make sure that we're expanding early vote and online registration. And I should add that we absolutely need ranked choice voting. So as committed as I am to passing HR 1 and to doing the work of restoring the norms that are necessary to make sure that we have a functioning democracy, something that all of us can have pride in and have trust in, that has to start with ensuring that everyone has access to the ballot, and that has to start with getting rid of Donald Trump and doing everything in each of our power to fight for Joe Biden to win in November.
Thank you. Chris, Zannetos.
Yes, thanks, Woody. So let's look at this realistically, right? Based on what your question was how can we get progress down in Washington, right? How can we avoid a demagogue becoming president? There are many things that we have to do around that, right? Unfortunately, the dysfunction of Congress has enabled a demagogue like Donald Trump to abrogate the Constitution and get away with it. Frankly, if our Congress were functional, we'd be talking about President Pence's response to coronavirus. So I do believe we've got to pass HR 1. I think there are great provisions in there to ensure that people have the right to vote in reality, to get dark money out of our politics. Unfortunately, I don't believe it's going to pass. I'll try as hard as I can to get it passed. But we've got to look at things realistically. And just saying that we're going to, perhaps win the Senate and try to stuff things down the throats of the Republicans, that's not going to do it. We're not going to get a filibuster-proof majority. We have to find a way to make Congress functional again. And the way you do that is by building relationships and by delivering solutions where they can win as well as Democrats so that the people can win. And don't get me wrong, we all are going to work very hard to make sure that Joe Biden is our next president. That is essential to the safety of our democracy. But even when that's the case, we'll still have a dysfunctional Congress that doesn't get much of anything done, even in a pandemic, as we're seeing now with the stimulus. They cannot work together. So we need to bring people down to Washington who have the approach to create these win-wins and to build the relationships to get things done. One of the first things I will do in Washington is I will find a Republican who will join me in joining the Problem Solvers Caucus. 24 Democrats, 24 Republicans who get together and try to find ways to work together. I will ask Derek Kilmer, a congressman from Washington, if he will invite me, and perhaps I'll have to bring a Republican to his weekly breakfast with 6 Democrats and 6 Republicans to find a way to get things done. But most importantly, I will work to craft legislation that delivers a win for the American people and solves the problems that stop us from getting things done, like comprehensive immigration reform. The reason we can't get anything done is because too many people in the United States believe that immigrants are going to take their jobs.
Yeah.
Not true, but that's what they believe. Well, let's fix that problem in a way that everybody wins, and then we can actually get progress.
Great, thank you. Dave?
Well, To your question, no, I don't think we can trust Republicans on this. I was in the White House when we nominated Merrick Garland to the Supreme Court. Mitch McConnell didn't exactly show himself to be an honest partner in that nomination process. And so I have a democracy plan on my website, which lays out a roadmap here. I was talking about it with Larry Lessig, who's a real champion on a lot of these issues that we need to talk about. So I think I'm going to focus on two issues briefly. The first is voting. So voting rights are civil rights, and voting in this country should be easy as a result, right? Well, it's not. Stacey Abrams should be the governor of Georgia, but because of voter suppression in African-American communities, she's not. We celebrated the 55th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act last week, which will be renamed for the late John Lewis, and it has been undermined and attacked. We saw Hillary Clinton lose an election she won by 3 million votes. We saw voter ID laws, even a new poll tax in Florida to stop re-enfranchise former felons from voting. This is why we need to fire Donald Trump. We need to fire Mitch McConnell. We need to pass H.R. 1. And yes, we need to end partisan gerrymandering. We need to make Election Day a holiday. We need to stop voter roll purges. We need to enact strong new ethics laws. Yeah, all of that during COVID. Yes, I agree. We need to protect vote by mail and the Postal Service and get PPE to polling places. The state elections in Wisconsin were a warning to the country. I also think we should end the Electoral College, make Washington, D.C. a state, lower the voting age to 16, and look at reforms to the Supreme Court, whether it's term limits or Pete Buttigieg's plan to make a lot of members of the federal bench a rotating group of justices on the court. We need to look at those proposals. Second is about dark money. The real reason we can't get a lot of things done is because of dark money and an ocean of it in our politics. I'm a lawyer. I've read Citizens United. It makes no sense. Corporations are not people. I think we all know that. And so, yeah, I mean, outside organizations spent something like $1 billion in the last campaign cycle. I went up against this system when I was in the AG's office. I investigated ExxonMobil. They spend tens of millions every year buying elections they can't win straight up. This is why we can't reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act because of the NRA, because they're stopping it. So when I'm in Congress, I want to be on the House Government Oversight and Reform Committee. That's the one where we can bring people in front of Congress, make them answer questions, pass H.R. 1 and strong ethics laws, end super PACs and lobbyist fundraising. I'm the candidate that committed to not taking a dime of dark money in this race.
Thank you. This time we'll start with Jesse's answer. So the question is, if, as we all hope, the election in November is a wave election, it'll still leave the Democrats with only a small majority in the Senate, and that majority includes Joe Manchin of West Virginia and John Tester of Montana, both conservative. While the majority in the House will hopefully be greater, any House majority still requires representatives like Spanberger, Slotnick, Golden, who represent swing districts that are much to the right of our district. Do you think the 117th Congress will be in a position to adopt the progressive agendas set out on your website? And if you do, how will leadership include and protect members from less progressive districts?
I absolutely do. And I'll give you two reasons why. We saw when Republicans tried to gut the Affordable Care Act under Donald Trump, people around the country, progressives around the country, rallied and used grassroots organizing, people power, just like the people power that's at the root of my campaign, to stop that incredibly harmful proposal that would have stolen healthcare coverage from people across the country. That was an incredibly progressive move, and we did it in districts that were red, that were blue, and that were purple. So we know that with grassroots organizing, we can create real progressive action. I also say that as someone who grew up in one of the very reddest parts of a very purple state. I'm from rural Pennsylvania. I've had the great good fortune to live in Brookline for 21 years, but my childhood was spent in a tiny town of 5,000 people. It's the biggest town in the county. It's a place where industry died a long time ago and things were lean, to put it very, very kindly, when I was a kid in Honesdale, Pennsylvania. I know what it means to be from a place that opportunity left a long time ago. I know what it means to be from a community where workers feel like they've been disrespected for a long, long time. I know what it means to be from a community where it feels like your elected officials don't see you or care about you or take you even into account. And as someone who understands that in a very personal and fundamental way, I think that as progressives, what we are proposing speaks to those people. You know, I was communications director for Governor Patrick. I think to a certain extent, this is about how we talk about it, not about what we're talking about. You know, we know that the fights that I've been in as a Democrat for really my entire life, the fight for healthcare, the fight for equity, the fight for paid family and medical leave and transportation and housing, these are things that will lift up those purple districts that you're talking about. And so as we work in collaboration and in community with our colleagues in the Democratic Party who might be from a different type of district and maybe see things a little bit differently, I think there's an opportunity for real common ground to advance policies that are progressive to the core and also speak to the needs of those purple districts, of those red districts in many cases. And I'm looking forward to using my unique experience representing what is one of the most deep blue districts in the entire country, but with roots in a very, very different type of place to be a progressive fighter and a champion in the most steadfast way, but to do it in a way that can build bridges with some representatives from the districts that you're talking about, places with different perspectives. And I think that's going to be absolutely essential to this type of success I can bring to this district when I'm in Congress.
Thank you. Chris?
So is the question how Jessie can solve her, achieve her goals, or do you have a different question for me?
No, same question.
Could you repeat it? Because I thought it was very specific to her agenda.
No, it's generic to
If you could just repeat it, please.
Sure. There are many representatives and senators from red or purple states who represent the majority in the Democratic Congress. Do you think this 117th Congress, the next Congress, will be in a position to adopt the progressive agenda that all of you have set forth? And if so, how will the leadership do that and still protect those people in the swing districts?
Sure. Well, I do think that some of my agenda differs. For example, with respect to healthcare, I'm a believer that we must have universal healthcare. I do not believe that we should be eliminating private insurance, as many, I think actually the other three candidates here do. So in that part, I would be a little bit different in what I was trying to push. But certainly in many other areas, in terms of driving for social justice and taking aggressive action, driving for economic justice, without which you can't achieve social justice, there certainly we agree. I would go back to a bit of my prior answer, right? That we have to find a way to deliver wins for enough of other people in Congress and in the Senate to actually pass legislation. And that means that we have to work together, we have to listen, and we have to come up with creative solutions. This is what I've been doing my entire career. I'm an entrepreneur. We try to solve problems people think can't be solved with creative solutions in a way that everybody wins. That's how we create things that no one's created before. That's what I did with Mass Bay. We've got to find a way to align people's agendas. You know, companies did not think that they would be willing to just give money to Mass Bay. They weren't recruiting there, but I found a way to show them the value of working together and what they get out of the collaboration. I think we have to focus on that. We are not going to get a filibuster-proof majority, regardless of dealing with Joe Manchin and other folks in the Democratic Party who may be to the right of us a bit. We're going to have to deal with the fact that we're not going to get it through the Senate. So I think that what we have to do and focus on is put the real issues on the table. And the real issues heavily revolve around the strength the Republican Party has with some people in the United States who fear for their financial security. Let's fix that. Let's take that away as an excuse from some Republicans, and let's bring some with us to actually who want to solve it, and let's go solve it. That's what I would do. I'd focus in that area.
Dave.
Well, you know, it's true. There are some differences here, and I will unapologetically push for progressive change that we need. This is a time to be bold. The 4th District has always led on these fights since Barney Frank and Father Drinan before him represented us. And I think we have to do that again in this era. So absolutely the answer to your question has to be yes. We don't have time. We've run out of time on the climate crisis, on gun violence. You know, we need to not just talk about these issues, but pass them. And so first of all, I think the election reforms we talked about in the last question are essential here. I mean, Democrats running for the House in 2016 got more votes than Republicans in that election cycle. But we didn't have the House majority because of gerrymandering. So I think that is really critical. You know, that's why Republicans wouldn't work with us when I was in the Obama administration. Because of gerrymandering, they weren't worried about losing to a Democrat. They were only worried about getting primaries on the right from Tea Partiers. And that's part of why the system is so broken. But I think the good news, Woody, is that Americans actually aren't as far apart as we are told on a lot of these issues. 91% of Americans think that if you want to buy a gun, you should have to pass a background check. that's 91% of all Americans. 75% of Americans believe that the climate crisis is real and that we should do something about it. But when I was a speechwriter in the Obama White House, I learned that how we talk about these issues really matters. So, for instance, if you said to folks, do you support the Obamacare? Only about 40% of Americans liked Obamacare. If instead you said, well, okay, what do you think about the Affordable Care Act? All of a sudden, 65% approval. So people would say, I don't like Obamacare, but the ACA, now that's good. And then if you actually said, well, okay, what do you think about people with pre-existing health conditions being able to purchase health insurance for the first time and not go bankrupt when they get sick? All of a sudden, 85% approval. So I think we can make the case here when we're reforming our democracy, when we're leveling the playing field. What are we talking about with folks? I mean, this is the chance that we have, not to just tinker around the edges, but to actually change the conversation. Green New Deal. 3 words totally transform the conversation about how we talk about climate and clean energy in this country. Those came from 3 words from a member of the Senate from Massachusetts and a member of Congress from New York.
Great. Ihssane?
Thank you. Well, look, while words really do matter, action matters most. And I am a woman of my word, and I'm a woman of my action. And my actions have shown that I get things done, and I know what we're up against every time we're talking about who's on the menu. When the corporations and the biggest corporations in Wall Street are the ones running the White House and running Congress, then the people are on the menu. This is not a red to blue fight, and we're not gonna win the presidency if we're gonna continue to think about this as a red to blue fight. This is a top to down fight. This is the working class fighting for freedom, fighting to believe in their democracy again, fighting to put food on the table, to have healthcare and housing, clean air and water, a good education for their children, to be able to take good care of their elders. This is not us against us. This is us fighting for us. And we have to start to see the people in this country as human beings and see beyond the labels. That's when we're going to actually be able to defeat Trump, to defeat all his minions. His minions are the CEOs of Wall Street that I fought as a Wall Street regulator. I know exactly how their systems work. I know exactly how they embezzle from the working families in our districts. We saw how they did it in 2008. We see again how they're doing it now, profiteering from the pandemic. We can stop that. We can stop that when we build trust in each other as a people, when we build solidarity in each other as a people. And that's gonna take leadership that comes with the intersectional perspectives and lived experiences to be able to bring people together, no matter our color, no matter where we were born. That's what our district is about.
15.
This district, which is very gerrymandered in the top-down level, needs somebody who can bring these communities together, who can say, look, if you have economic wealth right now, if you have that prosperity, if you have any level of privilege, it's your responsibility to use it for the sake of those who don't, and vote for the policies that are going to provide the basic necessities to live to all Americans and uplift the most vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, Chris, you lead off, and since this is your last question, I'll give you a minute at the end of your answer to make your closing statement. Despite the pandemic and economic collapse, the president still has a 41% approval rating, according to Nate Silver's 538 website. Acknowledging the inequities of the Electoral College, what were the factors that you think led the country to elect Donald Trump in 2016, and why do 41% of voters still approve of his performance? More importantly, how can we be confident that someone similar will not be elected president in the future?
That question should take about a half an hour to answer. That is a huge question, right? So in terms of the major factors that resulted in Donald Trump being elected, first and foremost, it's the economic pain and frustration and despair that so many in the United States have felt. The fact that they have seen their jobs be eliminated and replaced with low-wage jobs. They've been working as hard as they could and getting further behind. And they felt like the Democratic Party wasn't listening to them. There are so many people that I've heard from who said, I figured I'd give him a chance. I thought, how can it hurt? Well, we now know exactly how it can hurt. The other factor which underlies the economic issue, but also creates an issue around communication, is the fact that our society has been transformed by technology over the past few decades. This is one of the reasons I'm running. There are only 6 people in Congress who understand the technology that's driving our world today. And there are none in this race except for me. We have to understand how to regulate tech companies, especially companies that are platforms, quasi-news platforms. And I'm the only one in this race who understands how they work, who knows how to hold them accountable and won't be snowed by them. So we have to address those as well. How can we truly ensure that we don't have another demagogue like Trump, who's a danger to our republic, get elected? Well, the most important thing is we've got to educate our people. We've got to educate ourselves and the electorate. We've got to rise up as people and say that this is not what America stands for. And the way that we can do that is by providing the right leadership down in Washington to show them that our government can work, that it has integrity, and that we can get things done. And I think that is essential for Congress to deliver over the next 2 years. And as well, we've got to continue to call out the misinformation and the lies as they happen. I think the press is finally beginning to get a handle on how to, after almost 4 years, how to handle a constant stream of misinformation and lies from someone in power. But we have to certainly support that with the right regulations.
15. Okay.
So thank you for giving me the opportunity to close as well. And I'm sorry that I can't be here for the other questions and to hear the answers, because I'd love to hear the answers to this. I'll have to go back and look at the video. So look, folks, my father immigrated here with $100 in his pocket and a scholarship to a school that didn't exist after his first semester. And somehow he worked nights through at a paperboard manufacturing company, and he and my mother built a great life for my family so that I could go to MIT and not have to jump over nearly as many hurdles as he did. Everyone in the United States should have that opportunity, but they don't today. Nearly half of our people don't believe in the American dream of building a better life than the generation before. This is because there are so many obstacles for people of lower and middle income communities and people of color that many of us others don't face. We have to work aggressively to eliminate those, to create opportunity and real pathways for people to get good jobs. We have to create new jobs. And the Green New Deal sets a framework for that, but they're not going to magically appear. We need people who understand how to create those jobs, like bringing manufacturing for the wind turbines to our district instead of importing them from Europe. That's what we need down in Washington. I haven't been preparing for this race for decades. I haven't been working on my resume. I'm not a speechwriter. I just get things done. I bring people together to solve problems and get things done. That's what I did when I saw 9,000 unfilled cyber jobs in Massachusetts and every company looking for 4-year graduates and not having the 4-year graduates. That's why I created the program with Mass Bay. This is what I'll do in Washington. I'll bring creativity, tenacity of an entrepreneur to solve real problems in the way that everybody wins. And I hope I can earn your vote for that. Thank you very much, Kay and Woody. My apologies to everyone, including the other candidates for leaving. I really apologize, but it was a prior commitment.
Thanks, and thanks to your staff for
Thank you. I'll miss the rest of it. I'll catch it later.
Okay, Dave, I'll go back to you for answer the question. The question to restate it was, why did Trump get elected in 2016, and why do 41% of people still approve of his performance? And how can we be confident we're not going to have a president like this in the future?
Performance is it's a generous term for what he has done over the past 3.5 years. But no, look, I think you're right that Trump is a symptom of a larger disease. And it is also true, of course, that you don't have to go all the way to Iowa and Ohio to find people who feel unheard and left behind. And yeah, you can find them in communities I was in, and just this morning in Taunton and in Attleboro and elsewhere. You know, frankly, here in Dover, the election in 2016 was pretty close. If I'm not mistaken, Mitt Romney actually beat Barack Obama, got more votes than him in the 2012 election. So I know that they're Republicans and that they're real, and that, you know, we can't just assume that everybody agrees with us. But let's also remember the issues that we talked about with dark money and electoral reforms. The problems with the Electoral College are real. So too is foreign interference. Donald Trump might not want to talk about it, but Russia did interfere in our elections in 2016. And now, I actually do agree with Chris about how Facebook and social media platforms need to be held accountable. Elizabeth Warren is right on the money here. It is not acceptable that Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook just say, no, we don't control anything that goes on our platform. No, sorry, no responsibility of ours if Russian bots are all over Facebook and spreading propaganda. No. We're going to regulate them like utilities. We're going to make sure that we hold them accountable and make sure that this doesn't happen again. Elizabeth Warren has a plan that goes further than that closes loopholes and modifies the Federal Election Commission so that we can oversee and track foreign money in our elections and enforce the Foreign Agents Registration Act, which is a law that makes sure that lobbyists of foreign interest aren't putting money into the political system. But then beyond that, I mean, why do people feel left behind and unheard? Well, part of it is that we only show up when we're running for elections. This is why I've committed to the traveling offices plan and having offices all around the state. It's why my website is not just in English, but is in Spanish and Portuguese. It's why I have a small towns plan for places like Dover that actually invests in local journalism and in community colleges like Mass Bay and in broadband and 5G access. And then, you know, more generally, I think income inequality and the frustration that folks were feeling in this country is intersectional, right? I mean, COVID laid it all bare, but there's a connection here with a lot of these issues. Education disparities, disparities in jobs, disparities in housing, disparities in transportation. These are all the things that are dealt with on my website.
Ihssane.
Thank you, Woody. You know, one thing that I have promised to people is that we're going to work really hard on not pushing our problems to the side. We're going to work through our problems. We're going to acknowledge the problems we have in our country, acknowledge the traumas that have been caused by neglect and complacency, and we're going to work through it together. And this is where this question comes of why did Trump get elected in 2016, and why is it that he still has any level of support given the heinous crime that he has already committed against humanity in our country and given his fascism. And I've said before, I'm his worst nightmare. And that means not because of how I identify, not because I'm a woman of color or because I'm an immigrant or Muslim, not because I'm, you know, family with the Jewish community or any of these other things I carry in my personal life, but because I am committed to bring in solidarity and love in our country, to unite our country so that we can get rid of him. That is the power. That's the power. 2016 happened because we've neglected recognizing that our own Democratic Party has made mistakes. We've had politicians who have been complacent and who have been selling our voices to the corporate greed. And as somebody who ran against our own Congressman Joe Kennedy, and I'll tell you why. Because he voted with Trump to deregulate the biggest banks. And that by itself is very dangerous. And so I understand that sometimes people mean well and fall short. But in that case, he was funded by the same banks that I was regulating. So somebody with moral sense had to step in and speak up. And that is what our democracy is about. It's about holding our own accountable. It's about speaking up when they don't do the right thing so we can heal together. We can talk about our problems on the kitchen table and at the Thanksgiving table. That's what our democracy is about. That's how we're going to defeat Trump.
15.
And that's how we're going to defeat any system that has created Trump and never have it again, ever. So I can't wait to rally and to motivate and to mobilize the masses to make sure that we get Trump out of office and that we get the government that we truly deserve as Americans and as Democrats.
Thank you.
Thank
Jess?
you.
Well, Woody, let's be clear. Donald Trump didn't win in 2016. He stole the election, right? Through Russian interference, we talked about the ways in which he's flouting rules and norms as he's in office. That began as soon as he came down that stupid escalator in Trump Tower. That is not new to him being in office. That is his MO and was his MO throughout the election. And that is a huge part of how he lied, cheated, and stole his way into office. We also have to be honest that he did absolutely tap into very real, very legitimate economic insecurity in this country. But what he did that was so insidious, and we have to call out, is take people who were feeling, again, very justifiable economic insecurity, and in so many cases, allow them to scapegoat others. People who don't look like them, who don't love like them, who don't worship like them. He tapped into that economic insecurity and overlaid racism on top of it and gave people permission to blame others, to let that hate out of the hate closet, the racism, the sexism, the Islamophobia, the anti-Semitism, the homophobia, the ableism. And that is a huge part of why he won and why we are where we are today. Yes, absolutely. We had real failures around cybersecurity and real failures around the ways in which our social media companies held themselves accountable and we held them accountable. And we cannot talk about 2016 and why Donald Trump is president of the United States without talking about sexism, because there was a real healthy dose of sexism involved in the way in which Hillary Clinton was treated by the electorate, by the media. And we have to talk about that, particularly as we now head into an election with a Black woman, with a Southeast Asian woman on the ballot to be vice president in Kamala Harris. You want to talk about how we make sure this doesn't happen again? We have to tackle those issues of sexism in our media and in the electorate. We need to shore up voting rights and expand ballot access. We need to deal with our cybersecurity threats. We need to talk about education and teaching critical thinking. I think that means moving away from high-stakes standardized testing. And yes, we absolutely need to regulate social media the ways in which we regulate a utility. They have to be held responsible for the information that's disseminated on their virtual airwaves. There are so many reasons why Donald Trump is president right now, but I want to be loud and clear. He did not win. He stole his way into the White House.
Thank you. So we have two more questions. So next one, Dave, you're first. All the candidates in this race come from the affluent northern suburbs of the district. Why is the district race so unbalanced? Does this represent a failure of the state Democratic Party? Given the outsized influence of the economically advantaged areas of the district, how can you, as the congressional representative, balance the concerns of the politically and economically advantaged with the disadvantaged portions of the district?
Yeah. Well, look, first of all, you're right. Incomes in the northern part of the district are 3 times higher than in the southern part of the district. High school graduation rate in Wellesley is 98%. In Fall River, it's 73%. This is the consequence. And you ask why we only have candidates from Brookline and Newton. Well, in a system where you need to be able to raise or spend $1 million or more to run for Congress, yeah, you're basically only allowing people who have enormous amounts of privilege to be able to run for office. And look, I'm a white man. I recognize who I am when I say that. But, I think that it's part of the system that we baked in, and we need to do something about it. We need to change that system. That's why there's the highest percentage of millionaires in Congress right now that there has ever been. And this is why I got into politics, because I saw income inequality every single day in my classroom. And in the wealthiest country in the world, I think we can do a lot better. So look, I think if we're serious about income inequality and reducing disparities, then we have to address it comprehensively and intersectionally, recognizing that income inequality is related to systemic racism. So when we say that Black Lives Matter, part of that is that we have to act like it, and we have to change policy. You know, as President Obama said at John Lewis's funeral, you can't just honor him with words, you have to honor him with action. And so that's what we need. This is why I support a Green New Deal and making the South Coast the leader in Atlantic offshore wind. There's only 50,000 coal jobs left in the whole country. There's 100,000 clean energy jobs just in Massachusetts alone. We need to end redlining, which is ongoing. A study this summer showed that 70% of Black renters still face discrimination in communities like Brookline and Newton, and build more affordable housing. And by the way, you need to address income inequality in our tax code. You know, we need to, instead of giving Trump tax cuts to the wealthiest Americans and big corporations, allowing the Republicans to defund education and social services and everything else, we need to ask them to step up and pay a little more. The estate tax when President Bush left office was $7 million. Now it doesn't kick in, it kicked in at $7 million. Now it doesn't kick in till $22 million. That's crazy. And we can plow that revenue right back into building affordable housing and everything else. This is why I support Medicare for all. This is why I support finishing South Coast Rail. This is why I support, addressing the intersectional crisis here.
Thanks. Ihssane?
Thank you. You know, as we speak, the gap is widening further in our district. The COVID-19 pandemic has hit the communities that already were struggling with healthcare, with education, with the quality of the water they're drinking, with the lack of economic opportunity, lack of jobs, lack of affordability for childcare, lack of affordability of public transportation, lack of public transportation to get to the job. These are the communities that need us to step in for them. And with COVID and with the lack of action from our governments, those same people have lost their jobs and lost their health care. They do not have money for childcare. It isn't even feasible for them. And our schools are not funded to even take their children back virtually or even find some solution to help them out while they're forced to be on the job if they have to be essential workers. The problems are intersectional. The problems are interrelated, and they've already been like that. But right now, it's getting worse. You know, you might be living in a community where you're going to be able to send your kid to a pod, and that's great. That's great. But in other communities, they have no money to do that. And that's not just in the southern part of the districts. That's also in the wealthy communities, where especially poor people who tend to be people of color in those communities do not have access to the same opportunities. So when we serve this district, we serve the most vulnerable, no matter the zip code. And we have to be in solidarity in doing this work. So when we say that Medicare for all and a Green New Deal and getting corporate money out of politics and universal family care are going to be instrumental in just getting people to be able to breathe while we figure out the problems of systemic racism and sexism and xenophobia through educating and through getting our communities together, that work is so essential. And we have to move quickly. We need people to stop thinking about the me, and think about the us and what we can do for each other. Now look, I live in Brookline. I don't come from Brookline. As I've said to you before, my story is the story of the working class. Is a story of somebody who was mopping the floors, earning poverty wages, subject to sexual harassment and wage theft, and within 10 years was fighting the biggest corporations on Wall Street who have caused that poverty. But my success story is an anomaly, and it shouldn't be an anomaly. It should be afforded to every child and to every person in America. And that's what I will work very hard to do with your support.
Jesse?
You know, as the person in this race who grew up in a small working class community, an old farming town, a place where opportunity picked up and left a long time ago, and it never felt like anyone was looking in the rearview mirror to see how we're doing, this conversation is personal to me. I've had the great good fortune to make my home as an adult in Brookline since I moved there 21 years ago. But I'm from a place that's a whole heck of a lot more like Taunton and Attleboro and Fall River and the small communities in between than I am from a place like Brookline. And as much as I think having the most direct policy experience in this race matters, as much as I think the broad, diverse grassroots coalition we've put together in this campaign matters, I think it matters as much, if not more, that I have the lived experience that matches this entire district, to be able to show up and lead, not just with an academic understanding of what it means to be from a place like Fall River or Attleboro, but to understand with real empathy. And it's why I've dedicated my entire career to fighting for working families, to working for 2 direct service healthcare providers, working with vulnerable populations to make sure that they have access to the care that they need, fighting for paid family and medical leave. I was on the 8-person team here in Massachusetts that negotiated that law, the strongest paid leave law in the country, fighting for raising the minimum wage, equitably investing in transportation and housing and education throughout our Commonwealth. It's why I have built a base of support in the southern part of this district rooted in working families, because I'm not just showing up and talking about these issues because I'm running for Congress. I've been in community throughout this district with organizations representing working people throughout my career. When I'm in Congress, I look forward to being in community virtually, probably for a little while, and then in person as much as possible. It's why I launched my campaign in Fall River. And I am committed to building an office that looks like this district. That means in terms of racial and ethnic diversity, but also geographic. It's important to have people on staff that know exactly what's going on in the communities that they're from and the communities that I will represent with our entire office. This is an incredibly personal conversation to me. You know, when we used to be able to be in conversation in person in some of these communities, and I would talk about what it meant when the last paper plant in our town shut down and everything changed in our community, and my father's small business really struggled. When I talk about what it felt like for my father to sit us down at the kitchen table and say that things were going to have to be a little bit different around our house, I was met with a sea of nodding heads, because people had either received that speech or they'd given it. And I am committed to taking that shared lived experience, taking that fire I have in my belly, fighting for working families, rooted in my own lived experience, and going to Washington and fighting for every single one of the 34 cities and towns in this district.
Thank you. So this will be the last question. We'll start with Ihssane. So this is gets at some of things that have popped up on the chat. Ezra Klein recently published a book titled Why We're Polarized, which postulates that our current extreme polarization is a manifestation of the way our political identities have merged with other aspects of our self-identities, shape the way we view all aspects of our lives, including the interpretation of seemingly neutral facts. Hence, wearing a mask during a pandemic becomes a political statement. In the Republican Party, this polarization has spawned extremism. It includes rejection of science, of medical expertise, prevalence of conspiracy theories. Does this extremism preclude bipartisan collaboration to solve complex problems like climate change? And is there anything that can be done to reduce polarization in the United States? Ihssane?
Thank you. You know, the biggest polarization we have is to not acknowledge the power of Wall Street as it has infested our government. We see that every time we talk about the climate emergency, we talk about the fossil fuel corporations, and we have to talk about their influence in politics, because the only thing that stands between us and between resolving the climate emergency is our own corporations. And we have to have systems to hold them accountable and to get them out of the way. I've seen this as a Wall Street regulator on the books of large companies like Goldman Sachs and more. And I've seen that influence makes it really hard for us to pass policies when our politicians have been taking money from those fossil fuel corporations. That's where the problem is. The propaganda that comes from those same corporations to make the American people think that environmental crisis is a hoax, that is nonsense that we can beat. We, the people, can come together and start to educate the masses, building movements, and just like we have, just like the Sunrise Movement, and achieving policy together. So the polarization is not real. The polarization is us facing our own problems and holding Wall Street accountable. I cannot stress this enough. Every person who here in this race who tells us they're gonna go to Washington and they're gonna do and they're gonna talk about and they're gonna talk about, we're done with talking. We need the doing. And the doing means holding accountable Wall Street so that we can get things done. Getting Wall Street money out of our politics so that we can get things done. And I am someone who has never been invested in fossil fuels. I've never gotten any money from fossil fuels. I've never built my wealth on fossil fuels. I am someone who's committed to not taking a dime from corporate PACs and lobbyists and pharmaceutical executives and pharma executives and police unions, and the list goes long. So committing to the people at 100% is why I'm all in on this campaign, and to take your voices and fight for you like no one has ever fought for the 4th District. Thank you.
Thank you. Jesse?
So the polarization is real, but I am cautiously optimistic that there's a path forward. I'm not naive to the fact that the path forward will be hard, but I am committed to our democracy and committed to this work because it's the work that I've been in for 20 years, and I refuse to give up on our country, even though we are so polarized. I think there are a few things that we need to do. I talked about it before, but we need to pass HR 1. We need to get rid of the corruption and big money in our politics. Seeing firsthand as a candidate the ways in which money rules campaigns, as someone from a working class community who's raised all this money with average donation under $200 a pop, I couldn't feel more strongly that we desperately need campaign finance reform. We also need to make sure that we are leaving space in our public schools for critical thinking. And I think that means getting rid of high stakes standardized tests. When we think about what's missing in public school education right now, and I don't mean, learning in person and going in classrooms, civics education and critical thinking, understanding what it means to look at that questionable post on Facebook or that story on Fox News and understand that there's some deeper thinking, some deeper asking of questions that needs to happen here. I fear that our over-reliance on high-stakes standardized testing has moved us as a country away from those skills that are necessary to assess when things might be a little bit funny and not necessarily rooted in the truth. You asked if we could collaborate and find a way forward. In some cases, yes. Dave pointed this out earlier. There are so many ways in which we agree, right? There are so many things that we fundamentally agree on. So we need to figure out how we tell those stories, how we get past the noise, the headline making, the clickbait, and talk about the areas where we agree, not just because we want to move things forward and rack up wins, but because the areas where we agree, reproductive health, the need for healthcare, investments in transportation in a way that's equitable and tackles economic inequality and racial inequality. These are fundamental areas where we already have common ground, huge progressive areas that would be wins as we fight for our democratic values and working families. Let's find space to move those areas forward and collaborate. Again, I'm not naive to how hard that will be. I'm not naive to the challenges that lay in front of us, but we have an opportunity, much as I hate the way it has arrived in the form of COVID-19, but an opportunity to recreate our country in a way that is finally fair and just and inclusive. I am committed to doing that work, collaborating where we can, and making sure that we're embracing those facts, that we are bringing people together and we are rooting what we're doing in science and in opportunity and in creating a future that this 4th Congressional District deserves.
Thanks. Dave?
Well, I think, yes, I've seen the data. Trump supporters are real. Systemic racism is real. And I will say again that the good news is that the majority of Americans don't believe this nonsense. But I will say that as I'm Jewish, and I have seen, for instance, the ugly face of anti-Semitism up close. Swastikas were spray painted on my temple when I was young. I also remember a couple instances where people asked me where my horns were. And I know that this stuff is real. And so too is the influence of dark money and corruption of our politics. I mean, again, this is why I took a dark money pledge. I'm not taking a dime from police unions, fossil fuel companies, disavowed super PAC funding. So too is the influence real of Facebook and social media, as we talked about. And I completely agree with Jesse about sexism in politics and all of the ways in which the Trump campaign weaponized anybody who was different as part of their strategy. Don't blame the forces that Ihssane is talking about. Don't blame the forces on Wall Street. Don't blame the actual people who are corrupting our system. Blame immigrants. Blame people who don't look like you. I mean, that I completely agree is part of the problem here. But, you know, in addition to civics education, I think also what's missing from our schools is real history education. So this is something that I've proposed to introduce in Congress with a leader in the diversity inclusion space who I used to practice with at my law firm, which is called the George Floyd Education Act. And the model here is Germany. I mean, Germany has decided to teach every single student about the Holocaust and about the rise of anti-Semitism and white supremacy. And white supremacy is our common enemy here. I mean, the reason that folks in my temple are afraid to go to Shabbat services and worry about who's going to come in, first of all, is related to assault weapons and the easy access to ammunition and extended magazines in states like New Hampshire and elsewhere, which is why we need national gun reform, but is also related to the reasons that Muslims are afraid to worship in mosques, and is related to the reasons that Black Americans aren't safe jogging or bird watching or living their lives. And it's white supremacy. And so I think it is past time to teach all students in this country our real history. And this bill would bring folks together to do that. The NAACP, Facing History in Ourselves, the Obama Foundation, and others, to teach folks about John Lewis and about Juneteenth and about our real history. I think that's critical here.
Thank you. So that's the end of the questions. We have time for a final statement from each of you. So 1 minute just to sum up. Jesse, you're first.
Well, Woody and Kay and the entire town committee, thank you so much for this opportunity tonight. I've really enjoyed being with you. I'm running for Congress to take on Donald Trump and his minions, to fight for Medicare for all, and to fight for reproductive justice, and to lead an equitable recovery from COVID-19. You have a lot of choices in this race, a lot of options. I would ask you to think about who in this race has the skills, the relationships, the values, and the commitment at this time of incredible crisis for our country to go to Washington and deliver real results on things like paid family and medical leave, like I've done here in Massachusetts, on things like reproductive justice, like I've done here in Massachusetts, on things like investing in transportation or equal pay, like I've done here in Massachusetts. Who can go to Washington for you and fight for your families, your friends, your communities, and our district, and deliver real results? Turn those resumes into results for this district. I hope tonight that I've demonstrated to you that I'm that candidate. Please go to jessiemermell.com to learn more, and I hope to earn your vote either by mail or early or on September 1st.
Thank you. Dave?
Well, thanks again, Woody and Kay and everyone. Look, this job would be new for all of us, but the work is not new for me. I've taken on the biggest fights corporations in this country. It's what led me into public service, from a classroom in the South Bronx all the way to the Oval Office in the White House. Yes, we are in a genuine crisis. But I also think this is a moment of opportunity. We can pass a Green New Deal. We can pass Medicare for all. We can overturn Citizens United. We can beat Donald Trump. I know because I have. But as Democrats, we've been right on these issues, just not very good at explaining why. So let's elect someone who can tell our story. You know, let's elect someone who's already fought and won on every single one of these issues. I put out a pledge, as I mentioned, disavowing dark money and super PAC money. I've committed to the traveling offices I talked about. My website is multilingual. And when I say I want to talk to everyone, I mean everyone. So please go to davecavell.com, join a movement that can't be bought. My former boss, Michelle Obama, used to tell young people there is so much history yet to be made. Let's make some history together. Thank you, everyone, and stay safe and healthy.
Ihssane.
Thank you, and I'm proud to have the last word. Being with many fantastic candidates, look, this is about who's going to be able to bring solidarity across our districts and across our nation in a historic moment where we are facing fascism, when we are being sold to the biggest CEOs on Wall Street. This is our time as a people to come together in solidarity and fight for us, fight for each other. My story is a model of the American story. I came here with nothing, and I found so much support in the communities who have built me up, who have fought for my rights. And now I feel that it's our turn. the people who have lived those experiences to rise, to serve our communities, and to fight for our rights to healthcare, to housing, to clean air and water, to good education, and to good public transportation and more. I'm going to go there and I'm going to fight for you like no other. And I can't wait to have your votes. Please go on my website, ihssane.org, ihssane.org. Check out our endorsement page, sign up to volunteer, and join the movement. Thank you, and I'll see you soon.
So before I ask Elaine and Carol to close things, I just want to thank all of your staff who have helped kind of put things together and made things happen. Carol, Elaine, would you like to?
Yeah, I volunteered to do this evening. So for those who don't know me, I'm Elaine Rosenberg, and along with Carol Lisbon, I am the co-chair of the Dover Democratic Town Committee. First, I want to thank all of you for being here. It's a nice warm evening, and I'm sure you couldn't think of anything else you'd rather do, but it was really informative, and I hope that we left all of you with some more information about each of the candidates who spoke tonight. I want to thank both Kay Peterson and Woody Weiss for the incredible amount of work that they put in to make this happen. And it really was a lot of work. I also want to add a thanks to Jen Lucy, who took care of all the registration and getting out all of those emails to all of you. And also to Mike at Dover Sherburne Cable TV, because not only was he recording and live streaming this now, but this broadcast will be available on Dover Sherburne Cable TV. The schedule, I don't know, you'll have to check the schedule, but that's an opportunity, especially for all of those who had many other things to do tonight. We're competing with the school committee meeting. I understand where 500 of our residents are in tune to find out what school will look like for them. And I think that just shows us, though, how important choosing a candidate is, because we all have competing issues going on, and to vote for somebody who you think is going to represent all and do the work that you can't do because you're busy doing other things. I want to also let you know that that if there are other things that you're interested in learning about the Dover Town Democratic Committee, that you can sign up to be in our email list or go to our Facebook page, which is Dover MA Democratic Committee. And we post not only information about our committee, but we do post information that we receive from candidates. So that would be the place that all of you candidates who wanted us to make sure that we posted your information, that you would send that to our email, and it would get posted on our Facebook page. We are planning to have additional meetings, probably virtual, in the fall. And those meetings, basically, we'll be deciding the kind of work we want to do to support the 2020 election. So hopefully all of our committee members and all the others will join us soon. I want to once again thank you all for being here and pass it back to Woody and Kay.
Thank you, Elaine. That wraps it up. We will try and communicate any questions that have been submitted in the chat to the campaigns. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you all.